on, everybody. Hi, everyone. My name is Binary, and this is the No Latency YouTube channel. I guess we're streaming. I think that's how it's working. Yeah, it is. Good. Good. Because we're doing a lot with video today, there is a little bit of delay with chat, so please forgive us for that. But here we are for our Q&A, and then following this, we've got a big old live stream that goes on for a few hours, including a bunch of fun things, including an interview with Diane Hutton. Evan is going to be doing some painting. Spoon is going to talk about System Switch. Jade and Tracy and all of us, with the exception of our special guest, who I'll introduce in just a moment, are going to be doing a battle royale for something that isn't in the rule book, which is a great thing to talk about when the line developer is here for cyberpunk-red. Talking about that, hello, Jay. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, me.
Yeah, you.
Sorry. So we actually have two J's at rtalsoriangames.
Yes, quite.
Our art developer is also a J. Hello, I am good. Thank you for having me on your lovely podcast. I like that when you were pointing up to me on my screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you were not talking about me, so that was nice.
But you've been on screen this whole time. So, Jay, hello. Welcome to the show. You please introduce yourself to the audience. If people don't know who you are and they play cyberpunk-red, I would argue they should know who you are because they play cyberpunk-red. But please go into that. Thank you.
Sure. If you open up any book from the line, you'll find my name in there. I am Jay Gray. That is the letter J. No dot.
No dot, as you see in their bottom third.
I
got told off for the social media stuff.
It's an easy mistake to make. I am the line manager for cyberpunk-red, which translates to Mike says do things, and I make sure things get done.
Yes. And did you give us notes for Danger Gal? Was that you?
Yes. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That was. Yes. I was in charge of the Danger Gal dossier project, so I got to work with you and Tracy on that.
Yeah. Oh, Sky joined the club. Thanks, Sky.
Excellent work on Bozos and medias. Someone said, hey, we should have someone with a journalism degree work on some medias.
Yes.
And I'm like, hey, someone I know has one.
Finally using that journalism degree for something cool.
And then someone said, hey, we should have a clown write about Bozos.
Some British guy. Yeah, right.
It's amazing.
I know someone who went to clown college. Those are real things.
Oh, yeah, no,
absolutely.
I did a clowning class. I've been there, mate.
Oh shit. So perfect.
Yeah.
No,
and
it's actually a hard job being a clown.
Yeah, it is. Now, one of the things that because Tracy and I's experience is different. Like Tracy, you've had more writing experience than I have. And both of us, just so we're fully clear, audience. Hi, everyone. Tracy and I wrote for Danger Gal Dossier, which is coming out pretty soon.
Yes.
We're not revealing a date today. That is not what's happening today. Just know that it's soon. Yeah.
Middle of this month.
Oh, then there you go. Middle of this month, just in time for Comic-Con.
Yes.
Which we'll get to in a minute. But Tracy and I both wrote for the Danger Gal Dossier, along with a bunch of other great writers. How many writers did you have in total?
Gosh, I want to say around 14.
Wow.
It's a lot of, and it's like pages and pages and pages of just NPCs and places and stuff. It's great. I'm so excited. And I'm honestly like, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. You gave me pages of notes, and one of the notes I got a lot, not to pull back the curtain too much, it doesn't reveal too much, was, I understand this is one of your first writing gigs for this kind of thing. Please don't take these notes badly. I thrive on, hey, you did it wrong, do it this way. That kind of criticism. And I don't know how everyone else feels, but when I love that kind of blunt, this is what I needed. You took an action, didn't really work. I need you to change your direction. It was so great to just be told the truth.
Yes.
So thank you for that. I appreciate those notes.
It's a collaborative process, because I give you the way this project worked behind the curtain was James Hutt and I sat down. James Hutt, our lead designer, and I sat down, and then we talked to Mike, and we came away with, here's the art we have. Here are our factions. Here are our characters. We've said every piece of cyberware or gear this character has to be represented in their stat block. And then we do things like, oh, this person looks kind of stealthy, or oh, this person is probably a solo. And then we would give those, and then we came up with this, literally the brief we gave was, here's the story we want to tell, and it came to with the bozos, for example, we want to tell about the Clown Civil War, which is all the bozos have broken up and they're all trying to outprank each other in horrible, murderous factions.
Yep.
And so we will give stuff to the writers, and the writers will come back at different stages. There's the concept stage, the rough draft stage, the final stage. And they'll come up with ideas we hadn't even thought of. I will not give specific examples from your writing specifically, but for example, who was writing, the person writing the Tiger Claws is Japanese, living in Japan, has done translation for RPGs, Western RPGs for years. He worked on the original 2020. He wrote the original Pacific Rim source book. And he came up with these great concepts none of us would have ever thought of because he was on the ground. You know, he knows the stuff. And so from there, it's like, oh, well, that changes the story we want to tell because their story is so much better. And that happened with all the writers.
Awesome.
There's
All right.
something to be said about collaboration. Am I right,
Yeah.
guys?
I mean, we
Yeah.
love collaborating with each other every week on Wednesdays.
Well,
So you can
yeah,
check out new
role-playing.
episodes. Shameless plug.
Role-playing as a collaborative storytelling art.
Yes. And it's a brilliant platform to tell a story from. Talking about brilliant platforms, let's do this. Doesn't link, but let's start our Q&A. We're here to talk and take. We had some questions submitted through our website, nolatencypodcast.com/contact us. We might pull some questions from chat at the end, but of course, those who sent questions in ahead of time get priority. And of course, well, not of course, but Jay, you have very graciously offered to host this Q&A, and so they're going to start.
I was very excited about this because I usually get asked the questions. It's kind of cool to ask the questions instead. And in respect for John the Wise, who could not be here today,
Exactly. Yeah.
may he rest in peace. Literally, I hope he's resting. He works hard.
Getting those Z's.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll start with John's question, where he says, "Hello, you beautiful Jooms. After every session, I learned something new about myself and my GM style. I try to experiment as much as possible. What is something that you think you need to improve on as a game master?" So I guess this question is for one person in specific, but maybe some of you might also run games.
Yeah, we do. We'll get to that in a second, actually. This is good.
And how often do you experiment with game mastering specifically? And not other kinds of experiments.
So we have I believe 4 GMs and a player. Not that Jade hasn't done GMing, but just I don't think recently, right, Jade?
No, not at all.
But they did do a really good game of 13 Candles.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was very, very fun. But which of the GMs would you like to ask first? There's Evan, me, Tracy, and Spoon.
I mean, I think you should go first, Byron.
You know what? Real quick. Would you consider yourself a player or a GM first?
Jay.
Oh, yes. Because I can't tell which screen you're looking at. I am primarily a game master first, and that is not like many people. That's not through any desire to play. Actually, I'm a terrible player because I will get 3 sessions and go, God, this character. I think I've played this character out. It's time for something new because I got 10 more ideas coming up. And the GM will go, no, you can't switch characters. I have 5 sessions for the plot for you.
Exactly.
So no, I'm an internal GM.
I'm curious about the rest of you.
I consider myself a GM first, but I've always considered myself a storyteller. So any way I can help tell a story is essentially how I'll tackle GMing. And I'm always trying to get better at it. I know that when I first started, it was kind of shooting in the dark, but I was supported by really good performers and really good players who understood the assignment. And that's why the whole show, all the way back in season 1, episode 1, starts with like a really clear, like, these are these people, this is what they have to do. And I think that is in itself an accomplishment. But honestly, I've learned to be, I hope, a decent GM with the thanks of Jade and Evan, who gave me the opportunities to start GMing way back when they were starting, when they were running and still are, Save the D8. I got to guest GM on a few things there. It was really fun. But yeah, I'm always trying to innovate. And one of the things I'm
Yes.
trying to innovate in is getting better at remembering the correct rules.
Yeah. So I
Rule
would
schmool,
say,
honestly.
like,
Sorry, Jay.
like, I'll add to that a little bit. So for me, like, I want to say, like, I think anybody can be a GM, by the way. Like, for the longest time, I was always a player and never considered myself a GM. And I was always like, well, I'm not cut out to be a GM. And that, like, I had that kind of like self thoughts for a while. And I finally, like, in this past year or so, I feel like I've removed that thought from my mind, which takes time. Because sometimes you're just like, oh, I don't think I could like run a game. But anybody can. Like, it really is like you sometimes you get it can be intimidating, and definitely like there's a lot more responsibility than being a player, but anybody can do it. And I think one thing I find really interesting about our group, No Latency, is that we do kind of like go, like, a lot of stuff is go with the flow and what feels right, and not necessarily, again, like going strictly to how maybe something would go in the rules or something like that, or even like some of the dice rolls. Like, a lot of times binary, you're just like, you can choose what to roll for that. Like, you don't exactly make it, or like, roll me a first aid or something. Like, you allow me to choose what I want to roll for things sometimes, which I think is kind of cool and doesn't always happen in every
Famously
game.
roll for diplomacy.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's actually
Bureaucracy.
Oh, bureaucracy.
Yeah, roll. Yeah, exactly that. So that's something that's, I think, is kind of cool and unique. And like, as far as a GM, that's something I have taken for myself too. I'm like, sometimes you can let the players choose what they feel is right to roll in this, and not necessarily play it. Yeah, calling it out.
And to add to that, on my end, when I offer that up to the player, if I think the skill they're using is a good idea, then the DV is in a ballpark where it can actually be like beaten. But if you give me a crappy one, you're gonna have to roll crazy to get that right. And that is so much fun when you're like, oh, you think I'm gonna roll dancing, and then you get 30, and I'm like, well, I guess you fixed it.
Yeah.
Spoon.
Yeah, I would consider myself a GM first and a player second. And that mostly just is down to the fact that that's what I have been doing for the most part. For the past now like 12 years or whatever. Holy. But in terms of constantly trying to better yourself, I think that's something that we're all doing, even if it is subconsciously. And trying new things is how that happens. And I think that the key is to allow yourself the possibility of failure. I mean, because if you're going to try something and you're convinced it's going to work, then you're not really fully diving into the possibility of learning, right?
Right.
And so, like, I think it's so fun to try new systems, to incorporate other ideas, and to do something crazy. And learning the little like bits and bobs is so fun. But I have a big caveat here. I think it is equally as important to understand why designers have designed it in a certain way before you break it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And like, because I see all the time when I play with my friends, especially, not on stream, but just at an actual table, is that people will be like, oh yeah, like, I don't know if I like this rule. Let's just scrap it. I'm like, okay, we can do that, but we should probably try it first to see why they did that. I'm sure there's a reason. I'm sure that Jay and Mike have a pretty good reason why they have, for instance, all of these different skills. It's probably a reason. Let's at least give it a shot and try it and see what happens. And then once we've tried it and once we've given it a fair shot, then we can change things. Then we can add inspiration. Then we can do whatever, And so as much as I love trying new things, I think it's also important to understand why it was created the way it was before breaking it.
Thanks, Spoon. Evan?
Well, I'm going to take the middle of the fence answer here, and I'm going to say both, to be fair. I feel as the DM, GM, however you want to call it for whichever game you're playing, is also a player in the game that is there as well. And for the answer within the rest of the question, for what I have learned from that stuff is trying to be better patient and to work better with the people that I play with. Because I, starting off in ttrpgs, was one of those guys who I had something and I would overtalk everybody else, and I wanted to get my idea before anybody else because it was so cool in my head that I wanted to share it with everybody else and didn't really take anyone else's feelings into play. Then when I couldn't find anybody to play because nobody wanted to play with that guy, eventually I decided I would run a game for other people who couldn't find it, people to play with. And that's when I started realizing myself of my own faults that I had run into for that, and began to get better at that and for listening and learning. And now, like with games that I play, I try to really take into account of what the players want and work with them on that, because that's the point in playing the game. It's not the players versus the dungeon master or game master. It's everybody coming together and making this whole story and being fun. So it's not really trying to be against each other. I mean, I feel like most DMs out there really do want their players to have these cool successes. And just to bounce again off of what Spoon was saying, failures aren't necessarily really that bad. Failures are the thing that help add that tension and excitement into the game, because if you're suddenly, it's like when you do all the side quests in a video game beforehand and now you have all the best gear. Now you're just going through and it gets boring, right? There's no tension to that anymore. So that's how I'd answer that question if I was answering it.
And Jade, do you have an answer to this question?
Not really. I'm obviously a player first, and as a person who has played under 3 of the 4 DMs here, yeah, thank you. I'm so blessed to be a part of so many games. It's people are very jealous of me. No, especially Evan. I've been playing with Evan the longest. But to watch the different DM styles has bolstered my confidence in playing like as a person, and also makes me want to DM a little bit. I'm still very timid when it comes to that, but I'm just very blessed to be under so many awesome people.
Thanks,
Now, who's your favorite DM?
Man, it's like picking a favorite child.
Oh, it's weird. You got muted. Cool. Let's move on to the next question.
Okay, so the next question, actually, I'm going to stay with Jade.
Okay.
And we're going to mispronounce a patron's name. I apologize. Mirir?
I say Merriere because they're French, but that's
Merriere?
fine. And they're in chat right now. Hi.
Hello. So a question that I like to ask the players, as I mostly GM, to you: what makes a great game and what makes a good GM?
Oh, okay. So my favorite part of playing is the role play aspect. I really love a GM that will basically bounce back and forth, have a great conversation, someone who can really improv on the spot, especially with NPCs, and just being able to. I have an acting background, so being able to just continually tell a story without having to break for rules or, little crunchy system things, that's really important to me.
Cool. Does anybody else want to answer the question? What has a player makes cool stuff with a GM when a GM really goes above and beyond?
I really like when GMs do the improv thing. Like if you're going to GM, if you want to GM a lot, you should try doing an improv class. Just like a beginner one. They're super fun. And like you can do one on Zoom and never leave your home. I did a few during the pandemic. They were super useful. And I got better at being a GM because I was reminded by all that stuff I did at university about yes-anding each other, but also yes-anding like the offers that people are giving. And like, like if a player goes, oh, I really want to put this into the story, find a way to do it. I think that's what I would say to that. It's like, I like GMs that are yes-anding you and not, and it's fine I don't like no, but I also like yes and so, which is, yes, that happens, but also this left turn. And that keeps everything spicy for me. Anyone else?
Well, yeah, I'd jump off of that as well because being able to improv is a great skill to have that a lot of DMGM should have. But I think what helps take it to the next level for that is being able to take that improv and continuing it into a further storyline down that you've planned. So like I don't think a lot of people realize that for those who for being a DMGM, there's a lot of homework after the game that a lot of us have to do and trying to make sure that that story continues on. And even with that improv that we do on the side, we have to now try to incorporate that to what we've already had pre-built.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm going to say that I think that the best DMs are not making a game for themselves, but making a game for the group, which they are a part of. But some people want to play a war game where they get to drink imaginary beer at a tavern at the end of it. And some people want to have an improv class where sometimes swords get drawn, right? And those are two very different groups with very different games. And a good GM tailors their game to their group, which again does include themselves. So like for me, I like exploring like philosophical questions and like hard decisions in my games. And so I tend to put those in my games. But for playing with one group of my friends, I'll make sure that like every combat is very dynamic and interesting. And there's unexpected events will happen in the middle of it, so they're always on their toes. And then on another group, it'll be like, all right, so here's a fun NPC that has a funny voice. Let's have a scene for 25 minutes where then you ask their name at the end of it, so I think it totally depends on the group and tailoring it to the characters, to the players, and to their interests is the most important thing, because at the end of the day, a GM is there to make a story, like we said, with those people, not just there to tell a story on their own.
And there's they give us a pronunciation, May Ray. Agrees with you in chat. Thanks, man.
Yeah. So if I may, there's one more suggestion I have is in a lot of ways, being a player or a GM comes down to how well you describe the things you do or the things that are happening. Because I swing my sword, or I roll. I make an attack. I'm not trying to shame anyone who does that. Sometimes you're tired, and that's all you want to do. You want to roll those dice and get past it. But everything's more fun with a few more words. So think like a writer. When you're reading a good action scene, for example, in a book, don't just read the scene. Take a moment, go back later, reread it, look at the words that are used. Or there are a couple of books on writing action for writers that you can get that really will help you with that. Just having an idea where you can go, okay, I'm not just attacking. I am thrusting with my sword, and then I know what I roll. And then I can say, I'm only penetrating a few inches and then pulling back because I don't want my sword to get stuck. It's a very small thing. It's only a few words, but it tells something about your character and it adds a little flavor to the scene.
And it gives your GM an opportunity. I interrupted you, Spoon. I'm sorry. It gives you, I'm going to keep going. It gives your GM something to bounce off, something to yes and on, other than, Jay, you're right, that I slash my sword. Everyone slashes a sword.
Yeah.
How did you do it is important. Spoon, go on.
I think if we're going to go back to the root of this question, which is like, what are the things that you like that GMs do? I think maybe the most important skill a good GM can have is to, above everything else, is to portray the world convincingly and fairly, right? Like, I think that at the end of the day, if you have a story, you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so great. These characters are going to go here. They're going to interact with this person, that they're going to send them on this path over here to then talk to this person and have this big engagement that I have all planned. Like, that's great. And certainly have that in the back of your mind. But more important than anything is it should be to portray the world as engaging and realistic in its own terms, right? Obviously, magic, cyberware, not super realistic, but in the world, portray it as something that is true in that space. And that's where the whole like, from that comes the improv, comes the voices, comes all of the stuff that you have planned, as long as it makes sense in the world. Does that make sense? I might be waxing philosophical here.
To bounce off of that, that's actually like when one of my friends on my channel ran a cyberpunk-red game, and his first question for me, because he knew I already ran it, he was like, "What's like your number one tip that you would give me?" Like the general question that people, "What's your number one tip as a GM for cyberpunk in particular?" And I said that making the world feel alive, because cyberpunk in particular is Night City is a very unique and lively world, and you want to make your players like, this is why I play tabletop games, is because I like genuinely like to put myself in the world when I'm role playing. And so if like my GM can make me feel like I'm there, whether it's like, players always want to end up going to a bar. Like you're in Night City and you're like, I just want to go to a bar. So what do you like as the GM, like making that bar feel alive, making it feel like your players are actually at that bar in like a cool bar in Night City. That's all I want to do. I want to go to a cool bar in Night City. I got my wine playing, like my characters get toasty. I want to do that. So like that is something I think is very important, specifically for cyberpunk, is making the world feel alive. And that's something, if a GM can do that and make you feel like you're in that bar in Night City, that's pretty darn cool. So yeah, I would agree with that, Spoon.
Cool. So let's go to we've done some big questions. Let's do a small question. Where does Sloan stay and where does Sloan poop? This question is from Timebot. The second question is from me, because birds crap everywhere.
Yeah.
And I imagine very large birds crap a lot of everywhere.
Yeah, this is very easy answer, and that is something that has never come up, and that clearly she has a diaper, and I do need to change it.
Ew.
I thought you were going to say that there was poop collecting cyberware, but a diaper works.
That is cyberware. It's technology.
Coming to a free that's going to be a free homebrew on our Patreon, a cyberpunk nappy attachment for birds.
That's
and
disgusting.
to answer, it's just the easiest and the cheapest. And to answer the question of where she stays, I like to think on different rooftops around Night City, but kind of has like a home nest, if you will, on top of the building where No Latency is underground.
Above Joy's.
Crystals by Joy's?
I don't know. Maybe I figured it was a high rise and we were at the bottom, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's a single story. It's just
Joy's apartment is above Crystals by Joy, and then there's like some other stuff up there.
Right, there's like other stuff, and then at the very top, that's where Sloan hangs out.
And the reason why I say there's other stuff is because that leaves us the ability to have that be something else in the future. Yes-anding myself.
It's something we've never explored, but now I really want to.
So suddenly one day you're just sitting there going, "What's on the third floor?"
Yeah.
Has anyone ever been to the third floor? Do we really know it exists?
And it's just a really empty room. There's a cardboard box and a broken vid table, and Reeves sitting on the ground with like some old Chinese food. Hey, like.
Well, honestly, probably what is the most cyberpunk option would be that there are a bunch of empty living quarters. It's a bunch of apartments that are completely empty, but the prices, they refuse to bring it down to artificially inflate the rent. So that's probably what it is. Just a bunch
feels like a city that I live in.
Yeah, me too. LA sucks for rent. My God.
So what you're saying is the rest of it's an Airbnb?
Correct.
Oh, oh no, that's the worst. Although that being said, we are staying in an Airbnb at Comic-Con because we have a panel, he said, announcing it in the middle of the Q&A. We have another panel at Comic-Con. I can't tell you what day it is, but if you go to Comic-Con and you see us, if you see any of us...
Tell people which Comic-Con.
Oh, San Diego Comic-Con in July. San Diego Comic-Con 2022. If you find any of us in the con, please come up to us. Respectfully, I will ask that. But if you come up to us, we will give you a pin badge. We will give you one of these. give you one of these. We're also getting them with a black background as well in time for the con. And if you come to the panel, everyone will get one as well. So hopefully we'll see you there.
Yeah.
Supersonic Mike has a question for Binary. Binary, were you expecting spoilers if you were not caught up on like 2 seasons ago, I think? Was Binary expecting Jeb to kill Eddie the truck?
Oh,
Racing for Joy?
Racing for Joy.
In Racing for Joy, which was where Tracy first brought Vivi to the show. So it kind of sits between season 1 and season 2. I did not expect him to kill Eddie the Trick.
That was
That was great.
a dark ending. Really? I didn't see it coming either, honestly. I thought it was kind of a dark ending.
Also, can we just,
Canon.
Jay, I'd like to point something out at this precise moment, because you just sort of colloquially said something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many other ttrpg creators actually listen or watch the actual plays as much as you seem to. What do you see that as a benefit as a writer? I'm now asking you a question. Do you see that as a benefit as a writer, or does it dilute you at all?
No. So when Mike gives lectures about gaming, he'll do a workshop, or he'll do a lecture, and he will mention something called, it's very common in the video game industry, emerging gameplay. The concept being that you design a game with this in mind, and then, or he gives an example in Halo, and then people just decide the Warthog's invincible, but it will leap up into the air if you put an explosion under it. So it becomes a game to see how far people can get the Warthog to leap up into the air by putting bigger and bigger explosions under it.
That's cool. Yeah.
So I can't go to people's houses and watch them play. That would be rude and creepy.
Maybe some people would think that's cool.
I can. Yeah, I mean, but I can watch actual plays. And for a while before I was line manager, I was also media ambassador. And part of my job was making sure that people can see examples of play and then making sure they are right. So I would watch them. And usually I only watch a couple episodes in, and some hook me and I'll watch more or listen to more. But no, as a designer, absolutely. Going back to the GM question, listening to other people GM is a good way to learn how to GM better, because you'll get ideas.
True.
But also I learned ways people interact with the game that I hadn't thought of. And sometimes it comes down to like, oh, a lot of people seem to like this idea, and it's not something that we have in the game, so maybe we'll add it to the game. And sometimes it's, oh, that's just a neat little trick. You know, it's not something we can add to the game because it's such a minor thing, but it really, it really helps me understand the way the game is being played. And if you don't understand the way the game is being played, you can't add to the game or make changes to the game as the game goes on. And so in a way, you're all play testing all the time.
Yeah. And in that, as another sort of very quick follow-on question, with the there aren't too many cyberpunk-red actual plays that keep going. I think there's Oasis, there's Us, there's Infinite Sided Dice, and there's, I think, 2 or 3 more. How much of those do you watch? Do you drop in and out, or do you just try and catch up when you can?
I try to catch up when I can. I'm of the regulars I watch, I'm probably behind on all of them lately because it's just been very busy between Gen Con coming up and getting the Integral dossier up and other projects. It just hasn't been, but no, there's 6 or 7. Like I try to bounce in and out of Cyber Nation Uncensored, for example, because they've got so much content it's hard to keep up with. But I try to come in and out just to get an idea of what's going on, what they're doing, what people are watching, you know, what exposure people are getting to the game. I will say that if you're making one, if you happen to make, is I listen to podcasts more than I watch video shows, in part because I can take a podcast in the car. So it's something to listen to because I have terrible radio reception where I live. So it's something to listen to as I'm going to the grocery store. So I tend to stay more up to date on the podcasts than I do on the YouTubes. And staying up to date on Twitch streams is impossible because Twitch is a horrible, horrible archiver.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, so I think the advice that I would give people who want to do an actual play, other than all of the be a good gem, watch some other people get into that stuff, is honestly find a way for people to easily get hold of your stuff
Mm-hmm.
in a way that is okay for them. So
And I will
if you can put
yeah.
your podcast service on all of the different things, if you put your
Yes.
podcast on all the different things,
Diversify your content.
do it.
Yeah.
Put it
Yes.
out on the services.
Also, something that No Latency and Dark Future Dice and a few others do that's really useful is 4 hours is a big time commitment.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that you record, and it's just very easy. You're doing you're doing a live actual play. You just record, you throw it off onto your YouTube channel. But having it in, if you really want people to get into it, having it in easily digestible chunks of 30 to 40 minutes really, really helps, because you know what? That car ride I was talking about before, 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back.
Yep.
That's one episode.
Each episode of a actual play, in my opinion, should be an hour, no longer than about an hour, because that's digestible. The only time you can justify a longer one is if it's like season finale. This is the big boy. Then people are going to be like, oh shit, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to make a sandwich. I'm going to have a cup of coffee and really.
Even then, just make it a 2-parter.
Well,
which is what we did at the end of season 2.
I also just recommend you listen at 1.5 speed.
Which is
1.5 speed is really good.
I mean,
I hate doing that.
I can't imagine what that would do to Binary's already weird super.
Oh, it's great. I listen at
Voices.
1.5 speed.
Yeah.
I love it.
What I call his girly chipmunk voice.
Yes. Yes. Hello. Exactly.
That's the one. Yep.
hello, I'm Fresh P.
Also, speaking of easily accessible things, should we probably mention that this is a stream that's trying to raise some money and how they can do that?
Well, yes, I was going to wait till after Jay because I didn't want to make this too much. Look, as a creator, it's awkward to ask for money, but if we want to make some great content and get everybody to Comic-Con and go to Gen Con, we need the help. So we're going to give 50% of what we're raising today to charity. There's a bunch of donation goals we'll get into a little bit later, because I don't have a screen that includes Jay on that, but you can find a full list on Twitter and in our Discord. We've had one tip so far from Pirate Rabbit.
Pirate!
Thanks.
Hey.
You know, it might be hard to ask for money for someone running the stream, but not for me. So money, please.
So we're gonna go on because we've gotten to like 4 questions.
Yep.
And it's almost
Rapid
been an
mode.
hour. Okay. Ambreezy7, that _7 is very important, I think. Asks, what's something about your character that no one knows or hasn't come up in the show?
Ooh.
Who wants to go first?
We should start with the original, the OG players first, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Because you've been there longer, you've had enough time to show off your characters, so it's going to be really shocking.
Yeah.
I got one.
Sure, yeah, I got one too.
Yeah.
Go.
Okay. I actually come from a long line of execs. It's kind of a family business, which is yeah.
So you're a 4th generation sellout.
Well, yes, but there's some family drama there, so
Cool.
Retro? Sorry, Evan?
Yeah, that's fine.
Or retro.
Retro has been married before and is divorced.
What?
I actually
his
did know
wife,
I knew
his
that.
ex-wife, still lives in the city.
Oh,
that's
wow.
gonna be fun.
Wow.
Now you
How
know what
did
the
you not
Christmas
know
special is
that?
going to be.
Right. Yeah.
It's always the Christmas special is always a one-shot based around Retro.
If I can say one more thing, there is a clue in an episode where Remy does drop that too.
Very true.
That's it, folks. Comb through the backlog.
By all means, please listen to all of our episodes.
Spoon.
Yeah, something that actually I had the idea of when we first started, and it never really came up, and it at this point it might be not canon anymore, but I had the idea that like people that lived outside of the city were like nomadic and tribal in nature, and so I kind of based the idea that like Jeb was like a cowboy, but cowboy culture out there had morphed with like Native American culture. And so I have on my character sheet that Jeb speaks Navajo.
Huh.
Oh.
Interesting.
But it's never really come up. And that idea that like the outside the city people were like had this different culture didn't really catch on, and so it kind of doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
just
still
wait.
valid.
Just wait until you get the puzzle. Now it's been brought up in chat.
Oh
Oh no! The only way to get through this door is if someone reads this incantation in Navajo.
Yeah, there you go.
At least Tracy.
So for Vivi, I feel like there's a lot of things. Like Vivi kind of has an interesting past with like being a trauma team intern, is how I, started her out. But she actually kind of is a person who bends the rules and kind of bent the rules to get into trauma team as an intern. She kind of got in there unethically. And she kind of is like, as much as she acts like, oh, I'm a doctor and I'm trying to help people, I think she kind of has some unethical practices that she's done in the past. If like somebody wanted to try to experiment on something, like she wouldn't say no. So kind of, as much as she might be like sweet and innocent, I think she kind of has a bit of a dark side. And it actually, this is something I thought about for Vivi's character development. Like if she keeps getting exposed to doing like questionable things, like when we were at the spoilers Biotechnica building and she like stole stuff, like I feel like if she keeps kind of doing things that are a bit more like bending the rules, it might finally be a breaking point where she just is a little more rogue than she is like a good doctor. So yeah, that's kind of my little insight on Vivi's. She's not as sweet and innocent as you may think.
I love that.
I mean, she was working in a morgue, so.
Yes, also true. Yeah.
Very above board.
And
Yeah.
as television crime dramas have taught us, that all people who work in morgues are weird.
Yes, actually, very true.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, Dr. Dave was there. He stole a hand.
For binary, I'm going to pick an NPC.
Oh,
And
sure.
I'm going to tell us something about Joy that none of us know.
Joy is a twin.
Oh.
Oh, wait. Does Jeb know?
Nope.
There's still a chance.
Joy is a twin, and
Oh,
Joy is out there. Joy's twin is out there somewhere.
Her name is Cheer.
Oh my gosh.
Well, now it is.
Okay, so binary, I have a question.
Sure.
I have a question. On this little this Trello, which I'm using for the first time, you mentioned the person who had the many questions.
Yes.
But when I open their question, there's no actual questions in it. Are all the questions under their many questions?
Let me have a look. So in this Trello,
And while you're looking at that, I'll ask the question that everyone wants to know about Ayana. Why the phobia?
The
Of
germs.
phobia.
Germs.
Yeah.
I don't
Why
know where
the
it came from.
That's from time back.
I definitely think that it just kind of stemmed from the proper persona that she just put off automatically. It wasn't me. It was Iona. It just like naturally stemmed from being in a cleanly environment. And I think that working for Biotechnica and just being in very sterile experimental spaces, that she just kind of feels at home there. And I like it. I think it's an interesting choice and it's really fun to play with.
So I'm going to give you something behind the scenes as a game designer here. We were talking about emergent gameplay earlier. And when I was working on Black Chrome, we were doing the final layout. We had everything done. And what happens with layout sometimes is you find holes where there's just, you didn't have quite as much text as you thought you did, or something about the layout means that you have a paragraph's worth of space or so forth and so on. And sometimes we fill those holes with quotes. If you are going through any of our books, you'll often find these big chunky quotes made by somebody in the universe. Those are space fillers. They're also very good world builders, but they're space fillers. And for when we were working on the Cyberfingers, and this is why this particular Cyberfinger has no art, we found that we had exactly one Cyberfinger worth of extra space in that section. And we could have gone and rewritten one of the other Cyberfingers. And I was like, and that didn't feel right to give it more space and more rules or whatever. And then I realized that I was thinking, oh, well, there's this one piece of cyberware that's in No Latency, not counting Retro's head, that you've never seen in the game. And I was like, wow, here it is. And so we put in the Squirt Cyberfinger, which we made a little more versatile. It can be used for anything from hand sanitizer to perfume to water if you want to make a little spray gun. But that was, in fact, inspired by No Latency.
That is
Which is so cool. It's so cool to hear you say that out loud.
I saw that in the book and I was like, fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
No. As Mike Pondsmith says, steal, but steal from the best.
Yeah.
Wow. Also, I just want to say, Jade, that I think that the fact that you had that you didn't have it planned that this was going to be a phobia that you had or a trait, but it just kind of spontaneously came from you playing the character and like inhabiting the character, I think speaks a lot to how great of a performer and role player you are.
Oh my God, say more.
I fixed that.
You're like
question,
Patrick
Jay,
Bateman.
by the way.
I'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, let's this is from, I think, let me see.
Section M.
Yes, I'm just checking to see if I can say their name.
Yes, you can. I double checked.
I've already said Section M several times, so okay.
Yep.
Okay, so I have questions for all of you from Section M. This is a very big question. So we're going to go through this as quickly as possible.
Right.
Binary, cyberpunkred in general, No Latency is no exception, can be quite violent and dark. Yet you inject a great deal of humor and levity in the game. The NPCs are at times aware of the roles determining their behavior or stock, or inventing a drug like kitten catch. Meow, damn it. Is this just part of your GM style, or do you deliberately do this to offset the darker aspects of the game? For
Great
example,
question.
would you bring this kind of thing into, say, 13 Candles or a Vampire the Masquerade game?
That's a great
or
question.
Such.
Wow.
As a person who's like, I've been around the world. I've traveled around. I now live in America. I used to live in England. And one of the things about reading all the stories that I've read is that often when it comes to bleak situations, people get funny. I think for us to be, because as a GM, there is another player at the table when you're running an actual play. You've got the players, and I don't really want them to consider the audience that much unless I'm like, oh, at this moment we have to consider the audience. That's my job. And in order for it to not constantly be a massive downer of like, oh my God, these people are dying. Oh my God, the blood. Oh my God, the whole city's being overtaken by AIs. Oh my God. It's way better to have some comedy in there to just brighten it up. Because even in the most like dire situations, people find a little bit of joy occasionally. Like during World War II, when people played football on Christmas Day on the battlefield rather than fighting each other, that kind of stuff. Like there's still hope in the bleakest of situations, and hope for us comes in the form of voices and silly drugs.
World War I, by the way.
Oh, well, sorry. Yes, it was World War I. It's been a while. So.
Yeah, that's okay. I literally just saw a video on the Christmas Day armistice, so that's in my brain. It goes on with another question. There's two questions hidden here. It's really good. There's a lot of lore and material to pick and choose from, yet you put in your own ideas for gangs, locations, events, technology. Also, the Time of the Red has real scarcity, which you don't represent in No Latency, which, by the way, is okay. As a GM, what's your thought process when it comes to deciding what to take from the canon setting and what to leave to invent yourself?
Pocahontas said it best. You can't step in the same river twice. So the game you play is its own moment in time. And if in my opinion, when it comes to every ttrpg, with very few exceptions, one of the nice tight ones like 13 Candles, for example. Is it 13?
Yeah, it's 13
Yes.
candles.
No,
Um,
10
candles.
10
Oh,
10
10
candles.
candles.
Oh.
13 candles might be an old 80s movie.
I think it is, yeah.
No, that's
God damn
16
it.
candles.
Oh, no, shit. You know what? I'm done.
But my point is
Many damn
that
candles.
it is a jumping off point for the story that you want to tell with the people that you're playing with. That's what I want to do. And so if I don't bring some of myself to this, then it's a story that anyone can tell rather than one we can tell with each other, even if there's no one watching. And so I think it's really important as a GM for you to bring something. And at the beginning, when the game first came out, which is when we started recording this all the way back in 2021, when we released it, we'd actually started just before Christmas in 2020. The cyberpunk-red had only just come out. There was only one book. There was no Black Chrome. There was no Danger Gal dossier on the horizon. There was none of the DLCs that's released on the rTal website. It was just the beginning and the starter kit. And I decided I really needed to add something of myself to this world. And I wanted it to be slightly adjacent to regular lore. So because I didn't want to try and play too faithful to the lore, because anybody can do that. What do we bring to the table? And that's why there's a bit of like silly Britishness to it, because I'm silly and British.
Jade, a large part of the exec role is the assistants they collect, like Pokemon. How is it to have joint custody over such a large part of the character with Binary? Has he taken the assistants in directions you were surprised about? Where there are times that Iona takes a backseat during the action? There are times, I apologize, this is not a question part. This fits perfectly with your character, but you as a player sometimes feel you are missing out. This is actually super important because this also comes up with things like netrunners, where people will say, well, the netrunner's doing something. What does everyone else do? And sometimes I think people need to learn that sometimes you don't have to be always in the action. So please tell us all about that.
Yeah, so Vendel obviously is the largest part of our what did we just call them? Assistants. It all started with the original one shot where the assistant was Dash, who is kind of a knucklehead. And me and Binary working on Dash, there wasn't a lot going on. Dash wasn't a big part. But when we introduced Vendel, they kind of took on their own personality just through improv and like the way that I treated the assistant. And I think from the way that I treated Vendel, Binary created this personality, and it's been a very cohesive process of building this character together. Now through action, most of the time I decide what action Vendel takes, but Binary out of the blue will have an idea that is way better than mine because he can see everything that's going on, rather than me concentrating on what the next move is going to be. And so yeah, this collaborative space, it makes it easier to run an assistant, I think, because if I had to control multiple characters, now I have Fresh P. Instead of taking on another assistant, I built Risky the robot, which doesn't really come into play that often, but sometimes comes in like really in handy. Having to control multiple characters at once would just be a huge pain in my ass. So having some levity there is nice.
So give it to the GM who does that.
Yeah.
I want to tack onto this because the thing about we get Vendel questions sometimes in the Discord, and we had a Vendel question on the last Q&A. For me and Jade, the rule is I can suggest stuff that Vendel does, but if Jade looks at me and says no, Vendel doesn't do that, then that's the end of that. That character belongs to Jade, and if it's one of the difficulties of GMing in cyberpunk-red, it is a good challenge to have. It makes you a better communicator. You are playing with that person and you are co-running that character, and using the way that they're treated, because there's that rule, like the more that they're treated, the more positive points you get. And I think there's a maximum of 10. That's right, Jay?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and that's for each session. I keep a track of that, And Jade on the reg is always being positive to Vendel, always supporting them. And so Vendel will listen to them and put their life at risk. And that all makes sense. And so we have that agreement of like, if Jade is role-playing that correctly, Vendel follows orders. And it's the same with all of them. But that's the only push and pull. For the most part, Jade gets to decide, basically always, what Vendel does. I sometimes have an idea, but again, Jade says no.
The scary part is that Vendel is an NPC and can die. I mean, not that players can't die. Or lose a leg, yeah. So even though a lot of the times I feel Vendel is like our separate player character, there is the great possibility that they could be gone at any moment.
Which would be sad.
It would be
really sad.
Tracy, as the last to join the group, and a group that has already been playing together for quite a while, how was it to jump onto a moving train?
Yeah, another great question. These are all great questions. I will say, like, at first it was a little difficult because there is a lot of context of stuff that happened when you first jump in, and it helps. I actually haven't listened to all of No Latency. I listened to most of season 1, but not all of it. So there is, like, which almost even helps in a way, as like, so I don't like metagame anything. Like Vivi is also new and is like, hi, I'm new here. So I do kind of play into that a lot. And just kind of being like, hi, I'm new here. But I will say the group like picked up to Vivi very quickly. And I think that helped a lot. Like basically just like kind of welcoming her in as the doc, and she has been able to help. And I think that made it kind of easy to just kind of slip into the crew and slip into like just the No Latency crew in general. So yeah, I think it can be intimidating for anybody who's joining into a game where maybe the players have had a lot of history already. But just kind of playing into that a little bit can be fun. Just being like, I'm new, hi, and just having fun with that. And eventually you kind of find your stride. And I think, yeah, Vivi has fit in very well with the whole crew. So,
I agree. Yeah. It's also nice, especially for season 2. Like, some people are going to join at season 2. And so they're sort of like Vivi. Like,
yes.
And so Vivi asks questions that somebody would be like, oh, I haven't. And so that kind of helps fill in those lore moments, I think.
Also true. Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Vivi's character seems to be quite junior, as she's still in medtech and training, but this does allow room for growth. Do you have specific ideas of what direction you want to take? And this is always an interesting question. The do I have a build versus do I let the role play dictate my build?
Right.
Question.
Yes. And I think that, yes, I do play her as kind of like a novice. And I think I'm only I think I'm now at, I started at 4. I don't know if the rest of the crew, what their role levels or role, is at 5 or 4. I was still at 4. I was still new, genuinely. So, I did have some ideas for where the character could go. Again, I talked about this a little bit earlier, depending on like how choices are presented to Vivi. It could turn her one way or the other. I'm treating it kind of like a video game RPG, like Dragon Age or something, where it's like, certain choices, Vivi will remember this, and we'll
that little thing in the corner.
Exactly. Vivi will remember this, and so that could steer her in a direction where she goes a little bit more dark and edgy, or she stays kind of cheer and chipper, depending on how things turn out for the group in general. So that's kind of how I see it. She's at a bit of a crossroads, and where we go in the RPG scale might be where she ends up.
Cool. Evan. Yeah. They say, out of all the players, you are the one that stretches the games to the limit the most as a tech, which is true and is exactly what we made the tech role to do. Coming up with fun ways to blow stuff up or otherwise make things interesting. Do you have a list of stuff prepared somewhere to draw inspiration from, or do you improvise your great tech achievements?
I'm sorry to say, most of the time it's improvised because I really don't know what binary is going to throw at us. I do have some stuff that I have like kind of come up with, but that's been very much kind of waiting for the right moment for it to happen. However, for most of the time it's usually just right off the bat, like something that's happening, and I try to improv in the moment of something that I could recollect from scouring the internet on my off time that I could try to pull player bullshit on binary so he can try to get past something.
Cool. And the second part of their question was, with a TV for a head and now also a cybernetic arm, Remy has quite a bit of tech on or in him. He also has an issue with drugs and alcohol. Do you think cybernetics might be Remy's next addiction?
Ooh.
It's quite possible. That there has been some chat between me and Binary about what direction retro is going at this particular time. But for right now, just more of keeping along with the other aspects of the story of the game. And eventually, maybe one day you'll find out what we have in store.
Cool. Spoon. Jebediah is a nomad. Spoilers for anyone who didn't know. And while he has really opened many avenues of roleplay, hooks, and character choices, do you feel that this still fits him best, or do you see an alternate path for Jeb in the future? In other words, if you're still hanging out at the bar the entire time, are you still a nomad?
That's a great question. The short answer is no, but I never really see Jeb through the lens of a nomad. I don't really see Jeb through a lens of any of the character careers or classes. I always see Jeb as he is a cyberpunk cowboy who is silly and over the top and tends to get himself and his friends into trouble, and everything around it is just numbers. And so I guess, sure, like we've had the conversation on the stream that like maybe he should be a rocker boy. Is that what we landed on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got
And
rocker boy
like,
energy.
sure, whatever, I guess. But like, it doesn't, I don't, especially because like, at least in my experience in this game, which admittedly is weirdly not as in depth as it probably should be. But the like talents and stuff that the different classes or careers give you, at least in our game, have not come up very often. And so like when they do, it's really cool because I can whip out my motorcycle, which is great, and I think is a very cool cyberpunk horse, if you will. And so like, short answer, yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is not counting your solo from season 1 or Tracy's character is you've all got relatively I guess what Retro actually does, because Retro's using his tech all the time for various things, but the most of what Retro uses his tech for is passive. It's that bonus he gets to his tech skills as a tech.
Right.
And then yours is the motorcycle, and it's there or it's not there, and then Vandal is there or it's not there. It's not an active thing. In the same way that, say, a solo is constantly rearranging their points.
That's a good point.
And don't get me wrong, having the motorcycle is one of my favorite things. I am a motorcycle fiend in real life, and so being able to put that into the game is just an excuse to be able to ride around on 2 wheels, feeling the wind in my hair.
Cool. And the last question is for me. I see RTG as being incredibly active with their player community, answering questions on Discord. That's because I am ADHD, and therefore constantly, if I haven't switched a window in less than in the next minute, then something's gone wrong. being open to the talk of content creators and delivering free DLCs with additional content. Being such an active part of the community must give insights into how your games are being played at the actual table, physical or digital, that goes beyond playtesting. So I talked about this earlier, and we talked about this a bit, about, for example, putting in the Squirt Cyberfinger. The way we see it is this way. There's playtesting, which you do before you release a product. That is necessary. It is an essential part of the process. And then everything that comes afterwards is also playtesting. There is no playtesting like 30 years of active play, which is roughly where Cyberpunk is, because the first edition came out in 1988. So 30 plus years. So yes, absolutely. Paying attention does help us know what things are wanted. It gives us ideas. It lets us know that, for example, Elflines Online was relatively well received, and so we can do more of it. Or the Hardened series, it lets us know how people are playing. For example, the positive reception that Dark Future Dice had to the Fast and Furious series, which is an actual play about a bunny and a shark person. Really, I mean, obviously we knew exotics, which is what we call furries in Cyberpunk, were popular, but that helped us think, well, then that's what we want to, it moved them up on the time scale from where we were going to interface Red Volume 2. So that sort of thing really does tell us that, it also tells that there's as much, if not more, pink mohawks, to use an old gaming term, than black trench coats. So there's many people that are they are playing the mirror shades and the trench coats and the combat street mercenary game, but there's also plenty of people playing the fun neon glitz cyberpunk, just with a little bit of silly, a little bit of fun, not taking it too seriously as well. And that helps us think about ways in which we can serve both sides of the community and not favor, and know that we don't need to favor one or the other, because that's where the fan base is.
Yeah, I think I saw, we did a community game recently with that, with some of the players of our community, and yeah, very much went into more of the glitz side than of the dark shades and so forth. One of our characters actually used black chrome for the cyber enhancements to show themselves off as more of like a canine figure for them, and it was pretty interesting. It actually inspired me to create a thing right off the bat for improv of a bar called The Jungle, where there was a massive jungle gym built on the roof for all the kinds of animal style characters to go and play around in.
That's very cool.
That is really cool.
we have a question from Suckerpunk Productions here. If your character dies, what character would you roll up next?
Oh gosh. Oh, have any of us thought deep about our characters dying? I
have 5 of them already.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Evan has a few. So Evan, do you want to go first while everyone else goes?
Okay. The one that I have, I wanted to start off as a rocker boy, but then also as soon as afterwards to dip into corpo. Was that I wanted to create a joy toy who has gone into work for themselves.
Nice.
And now they're kind of putting themselves out there and kind of creating their own business, going out there to work. So they kind of have a bit of a fan base already, but now they're creating their own kind of company wide for it. And they're just very much of that like super cool, sexy. So like they can kind of get in everywhere, but they're still like getting their business off the ground. And so for them, like that's kind of their motivation.
Jay, who should I pick on next?
You should pick Spoon.
Yeah, if Jeb ever bites the dust, I feel like having a character who is obsessed with their like online appearance and their prestige, essentially being a
You'd be a media.
I'd be a media, but it would be like, I just love the idea of having someone be constantly like recording and constantly being online and constantly being like looking things up and being way more, especially because Jeb is like not connected to the net at all.
He's a reluctant famous person.
Right. Kind of turning the dial on that one and going the opposite direction and having someone be a content creator, but hyper stylized influencer type would be fun.
So see, I'm going to suggest you two switch, not the characters, but the roles, the classes, because to me, so media, you think about, oh, well, they tell a story and they publish a story, and but the point of the media is that they hear rumors, they investigate things, they learn things, and then they put information out there to affect a change. And I think a Joy Toy with a lot of customers, with just the right, being able to whisper just the right thing into just the right ears, will cause just as much change as a sensational story. Whereas what Spoon just described to me is a very classic rocker boy.
There you go.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Who's next?
That's perfect. See, I appreciate that help because kind of like what I said earlier, where like I like to start with the concept and then take and build from there, as opposed to, which, don't get me wrong, there's no right way to do it, but as opposed to the other way around, just kind of starting at the bottom and choosing a class and character and numbers and then forming out the character the other way.
Yep.
Okay, so Tracy.
I think, well, I actually was, when I was going to join No Latency as a permanent role, I was actually torn between the two side quest characters that I had played. So Vivi was one of my side quest characters, and Pris was the first one that I played with John. And I might actually consider bringing back Pris if something happened to Vivi.
That would be a good vibe. I like that. Yeah,
she's kind of more like the serious, like femme fatale kind of role, which I like to play as a solo. So that would be fun. Or maybe
also, she's not dead yet.
She's not dead, and she's in there. Yeah. But maybe Pris or something new that I've never played, like a Netrunner or something. That might be fun. But yeah. That's who I play.
And if Yana gets called to the home office for permanent retirement.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, right. I recently played like a horror one-shot in D&D with a heavy metal Dampier. And I think that having kind of like this furry, furry band member going full rocker boy, just like literally clawing their way up the music scene would be fun.
And there's cyberware that you can get to make yourself like a
just figured that out.
Hell yeah.
Okay. So Anonymous, the ever popular web personality, asks, who is your favorite NPC?
You know what I'm going to do? Jay, who's your favorite NPC on the show? It's your turn to answer.
So I'm gonna leave out Vendel because, as we point out, Vendel is almost not an NPC.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
So I am going to say, oof.
I know.
This is tough.
Yeah, we have a lot of NPCs. These fuckers drag them around.
I really enjoy the Steves. Like Steve is like one character really, not counting Fresh Pete. But I enjoy the Steves because I've often said that part of what makes cyberpunk fun is what I call theater of the absurd, which is basically that the world is so screwed up that these absurd things like the bozos or an entire gang of poser gangers biomodding themselves to look like old TV characters can exist. And the concept of the Steves, even after they revealed, actually, in some ways, I feel like you Borg them, where like after you knew more about the Borg weren't as interesting.
Yeah.
I thought the Steves were a little more interesting when you didn't know their great big dark secret of weird original bioengineering cloning. They were just like these guys that for some reason they're all gold and they're all Steve. And like that was fun.
All gold, all Steve.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun having those characters. But also, I think I'd like to point this out. We couldn't have had the Steves be the grunt enemy forever.
No, of course not.
You have to move on from that. Otherwise,
because otherwise
gotta have
you
a
wouldn't
payoff.
have. Well, there's that, and also there wouldn't have been any sense of growth. Batman doesn't fight Calendar Man forever.
Yes, exactly. Only on
He
every
does
national
fight
holiday.
Joker forever.
Yeah,
No,
well,
have
Joker's
you
his
seen the
top-
Killing
his-
Joke?
His top tier, though.
Hmm.
Okay,
Who's
well,
to answer?
so Binary's
NPC.
next then.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
What's
good.
your favorite?
Who's your
NPC?
favorite child, Binary?
My favorite child. I think my favorite child. We can't count Vandal. Honestly, my favorite to play on a regular
Yes.
basis that's an NPC is probably Sawtooth.
That was my choice.
He's just so silly, and I love his slightly complicated background. Like, he used to be a solo and then gained a phobia of blood and decided to become a doctor. He's also stinking rich. And I love those ideas of just like, oh yes, if you could just Iona, we're dating, right? I don't know. The idea of like how I love the idea that like them secretly dating is no longer a useful part of their relationship, but they continue it because it might be useful later on. It feels like.
I love the concept that someone said, "Oh, I'm afraid of blood now. What's the one profession I can get in with less blood
Yes.
than being a professional killer?"
Yeah.
Well, it was a transferable skill. If he knew how to rip off an arm correctly, he knows how to reattach.
I don't think it works that way.
That's
Yeah.
cyberpunk as fuck, I think.
Yeah.
Plus
Okay.
one to that. Yeah, Sawtooth, my favorite also. So
Yeah.
Okay, well there you go. That's Colin Tracy.
Yep.
We
But
go
the
there a
question
lot.
is Sawtooth Jade's favorite?
If my favorite NPC moment was when Binary brought Dash back.
That was great. I gotta say that was a truly emotional moment,
Yeah,
and you played the hell out of that.
yeah, you did
And
a great job. Jake.
it's something I will never forget. And I Dash has a special place in my heart.
It was a fun episode. The episode's called Dash Inside, season 1.
We won't say what happens, but bring your tissues.
Yeah, bring it to you.
But it's good.
Evan,
It's tough. I'm trying
Mama
to
Mallard
decide
doesn't
between
count.
3 of them.
Mama Mallet doesn't count.
Damn it. Okay. Well, see, I really like Clive because Clive's also very helpful for us. And then, as much as we also bag on Reeves, Reeves is also still pretty fun. Like, we get a bag on Reeves, but we don't have any like hate towards Reeves. We just kind of like are annoyed by them, and I kind of enjoy that. But I guess my favorite has to be the landlord for me and Sano. Yeah.
Ivan, he's
Because
fun.
interacting the most, yeah, and so I'd say that yes, trying to at least improv chops between me and Binary when we're getting to that is probably one of the more fun and also the most challenging while not trying to overstep onto the NPC.
Good. Yeah.
only
That's
one
good.
person left.
You know, you beat me to it because I love Reeves because we can rag on him. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
he's fun because he's like, oh my god, this guy. And normally that spot is reserved for Jeb, and so it's nice. So we can offload that onto somebody else who's even
Accurate.
more annoying.
That's really good.
Yeah, at least Jeb can shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Most of
one
the
thing
time.
you can do.
And show up on time. Jesus.
Sometimes.
Damn.
Yeah, Evan is not Evan. Reeves is awful. Not you, Evan. I love you.
That's a Freudian slip right there.
No, it's because I looked at your name on the preview screen. Anyway,
Okay. So this is from Artemis Rowan over at Oasis Cyberpunk.
excellent
What?
show. Make sure you check it
Yes,
out.
yes.
Mhm.
What do you feel is the biggest? I'm going to alter the question slightly, and I'll explain why in a second. What do you feel like are the biggest challenges in simulating and running the world of rTalsoriangames Night City? And they originally said Mike Pondsmith, but Mike will be the first person to say that he was not alone in making Cyberpunk, and it's been a team effort for the past several decades.
So what's the biggest challenge?
Challenge in running Night City. Such a well-known, the now established location.
Mm.
I've lived in a few cities, and whenever you move to a new city, the first time you get there, the city presents itself to you, right? and then you have to make your mark on that city if you're going to live there. And I think that's what you do is you see what's offered first, and then you yes and the offer of the city. Yes, it's dangerous, but even in the most dangerous places, you can have little corners of safety, like if you build a bar underground, or if you have friends in high places who will help you do heists into space, for example. There's loads of things that you can give to the world by sort of yes-anding not only the players, but the setting itself, I suppose, is what I like to do. Does that answer the question? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it does. I'd say the biggest challenge of running any setting, especially a setting like Night City, in some settings it doesn't matter, but this is true, say, of playing Ravenloft, for example, or Cyberpunk with Night City, is that your setting is a character. And if it doesn't feel like it's not the X+1 character in the game, I think you need to work on it some more. It should feel like you're constantly living in a city, and the city is constantly pushing at you in some way, or the vampire-induced shadow plane, or whatever you call it. Right.
Well, I think Binary does a really great job of that, especially with their friend April Anonymous, who constantly helps build the outside city for the rest of us to get to hear from their news reports. And I think that that's a big thing, not only for us as the players, but for the audience to get to feel, just like you were saying, Jay, of the city's own character breathing and the things that are involved outside of there. Because if you pay attention to them, they do kind of mention some of the things that the No Latency crew are doing, but there's also, if you catch it, a lot of Easter eggs outside that come up later on that we didn't catch on even as players at that time.
And I've slowly started animating those plot hooks essentially and putting them on as shorts on our YouTube channel, which they're out of context enough that if you wanted to use them as a hook for your own game, you could totally just play it on the screen with your team, man. Do it.
There you go, everyone. Binary saving you some work.
Yeah, but that's what we're going to start doing with No Latency. We're going to have a lot more behind the bar stuff, which we'll get to in a minute. I've started releasing some videos based on some GM tips about how to create memorable NPCs, and I'm going to go on to do some more stuff about the GMing that I've learned through playing with these wonderful people for like 2.5 years.
Cool. If I can jump in on the running a game in a canonical world, I think one of the biggest things to learn how to do as a GM that's running a game in a world that your players already know about and is well known is knowing what the core elements are that make it that world, right? Like Ravenloft, you got to have the dark spookiness, but how you achieve that dark spookiness can kind of change. Like I remember playing running a game in the Star Wars universe for my friends, and it was important to have lightsabers and to have the Force and to have weird aliens, but like you don't really need to sweat too much on being like, oh, if this happens in the world, like, is that canon to Wikipedia? Like, I don't know if you need to have Wikipedia up on one of your screens to be able to run a game in Star Wars. You just need to know the basic elements that make Star Wars what it is. You need to know what makes Night City what it is. You need to know what makes Ravenloft what it is. And then you can change the details, because that's not why your friends are there.
That's true.
So, Jay, we've probably got time for one last question. If you have one of your own to ask us as a crew, or if there's one in the kitty there that you really like.
Well, I'll ask this one last one. I'm going to admit something, is that when I first started my job as media ambassador, and I was listening to No Latency, or I was listening to one of the other podcasts, and there was a rule deviation, you could feel my chest tightening up.
Yeah.
The first time you used advantage, for example, like my brain is going, "You're throwing off the probability curves."
Yes, I am.
Which you absolutely are, and it's fine. So over time, it took time to internalize the concept that, and this is true. It's something I knew, but it's different to know it and know it. You know what I mean? To know that every table is different. And even the same table is not the same from night to night,
right?
Or from game to game. And so, what you do, we give you the book. What you do with it, that's your choice. There's no invalid way. so long as you're not being a douchebag to play.
Amen.
It's actually because in one of the latest AMAs on the rTalsorian Discord, I asked like, what's your favorite rule that what's the rule that you think about the most that comes from an actual play game that wouldn't actually work at home? And this is something you mentioned.
Yeah, I do mention that advantage is a tough rule. It works really well in an actual play because an actual play is a story about characters, and you don't want the characters to die. You want the characters to relatively succeed. If a character gets stuck, the plot doesn't move forward.
Exactly.
At home, I feel it doesn't work quite as well. It may work for your table, it may not, but it can trivialize things. In fact, I remember at one point, I apologize, I don't know Sano's player's name.
Oh, Kendall.
I remember Kendall mentioning he wanted harder fights.
Oh, he got them.
Oh, yes, he did.
Oh.
Absolutely. But my point being is that, I
Damn.
think it's a tough rule to implement. And if you do implement it, be aware that it can really change how often failure occurs.
Yep.
And as we mentioned earlier, sometimes failure is a great storytelling. And it also, with no failure, there's less tension.
Yeah. And as Adam Savage says best, failure is always an option.
It is. But this is from Frog DM, and basically it boils down to, what is your philosophy on homebrewing? Are you a more keep it nice and neat kind of homebrewer, or homebrewer is fine, it's not outlandish, or do you like to push it as far as it can before you see it break?
I'm a middle way person, and I think the more I've played and run Cyberpunk in general, the better I've got at looking at a homebrew and being like, would that work for us? And I think that's the question you have to ask yourself when you look at homebrew content for any TTRPG. Does it work for us? Not does it work for everyone?
Right.
That's a whole different balance thing. Does it work for your group? And when we release our homebrews, and they're always free on the Patreon, you can go and grab them. When we release those, they're there for you to adapt for your game. It's just an idea, man. You know what I mean? And if that idea jives with your crew, as long as you've got everyone on the same page, as long as you're like, hey, I want to add some homebrew stuff, how does people feel about that? You're good. But you've got to make sure you're all on that same page of it. And we like to do homebrew because we're here to create and make this bigger and kind of and the audience into hopefully giving them the confidence to be like, I've got an idea for an item that's not in the book. GM, they should feel like they should say that, because sometimes it just works for your group.
That is exactly why the tech exists. And I'm going to say, you don't need a tech in your party to do that. If you have an idea for an item and you want it in game, tell your GM, and your GM can either say, oh yeah, you'll find it in the net market, or, oh yeah, you can find a tech, that's a quest.
Yes.
That is exactly why we have in there. Interlock, which is the system that Red runs on, has always been specifically homebrew friendly. We don't try to tell you how to do everything, because you can't. You cannot cover every situation that's going to occur at a table in a single book, or even 100 books.
Right.
There's always going to be something that's going to come up. But B, because we want to leave space. We do this with Night City too. There's plenty of open space in Night City for you to put in your own bars, your own restaurants, your own nightclubs, your own newspapers, your own gangs, because we may not decide. Sometimes there's legal there, so we can't make the Gilligans anymore because they actually pay attention to these things these days, the trademark lawyers. But also because, we may decide that, there's no room right now in our version of Night City for a baseball themed gang, but it might be absolutely essential for yours. And that's great. Go for it. We give you the book. Do what you want with it.
All right. I think that's going to be where we end our Q&A.
Thank you so
Jay,
much.
thank you for joining us and
Jay.
hosting this.
Thank you
Do you have
so
anything
much.
to talk to the stream, the audience, the people watching in the VOD, all of that business about
Sure.
what's on?
So very briefly, obviously, cyberpunk-red exists. Black Chrome came out not too long ago. Please get it.
Yes.
Some really great art in that book.
There is some really great art in that book, and more importantly, it's lots and lots of cool stuff. And even if, I heard someone the other day say, I'm more of a lore person than I am an item person, I guarantee there's a lot of lore in all those item descriptions. Every one of them, you will see stories about Sovoil, for example, messing with rebels in Georgia. We don't tell you which Georgia. There's more than one.
Yes.
It's true.
So for that, Danger Gal Dossier will be out soon. But more importantly, because you love free stuff, every month, every single month, we put out what we call a DLC on our website. It's usually towards the end of the month, except for April, where we put it out on April 1st. And it is always something different. This month's were Punk Knots. Punk Knots are what happens if a gang decides that they want to A-team up, for those of you old enough to get the reference, a couple of trucks with some AV4 engines to build a machine capable of breaking through a police barricade.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, keep coming back because there's free content every month, and we're the only ones that do it.
Yep.
That's so cool, honestly.
We have content every week. Shameless plug. Come check it out. But come check us out. Check out the website at what is it? rtalsoriangames.com.
rtalsoriangames.com.
Yes, and follow them on Twitter as well. You can see
If
that
you
handle
can.
right there.
If you can on Twitter.
As
You
well,
can right
yeah.
now. Let's not get into the politics of that and move swiftly on.
Yes.
But thank you so much, Jay. We really appreciate it. And of course, chat for being here. Stick around, everyone, as we head into our exclusive premiere of our interview with Dayan Hutton, voice actor of a bunch of video games, including Life is Strange, and was on the one shot with Tracy for what we called Ambulance Panic, but the Discord is called Girls Night Out. And everyone, I just want you all to know, I've been having some conversations with people, and it looks like we might have a sequel to Girls Night Out soon, which is very exciting. We haven't recorded it yet, so it might be a minute, but we're going to do it, and that's going to be fun. So we'd like to once again thank you, Jay, for being here. We really appreciate all of the work that you do as a
Thank you for
creator in
helping
this.
Having me. Thank you for
Yes,
having
of
me.
course.
Thank you for helping me show people the wonders that are cyberpunk-red.
And that's
Yay!
hopefully that is one of the great things I love about rTal is you guys, like, when I send you a message, like, you reply. Like, oh yeah. And you give me the truth, it's great. And we really appreciate that, like, open communication. That's dope. Thank you.
Yes.
But Jay, that's it. You can just close the window and we'll see you later.
Have a fun rest of the stream, everybody.
Thank you, Jay.
Bye. Thanks, Jay.
Bye.
The stuttering.
Yeah. Whoop. And they're out. Okay, everybody. We have
I can't see Vivi. Is that on the stream?
I'm here.
Vivi's on the
I see
screen.
Vivi.
She's good.
I'm here.
So before we move on to our next segment, which is this pre-recorded interview with Dayan, here on the screen are our donation goals. We've had a few $10 tips, which means we're going to be rolling in those people's names at Comic-Con.
Hype.
Hype. And Sucker Punk Productions, send me a DM because I've got something in the mail for you now. If you'd like to get stuff like that, you can. If we get to $100, that's our first goal so far. We're going to be giving away a digital copy of Black Chrome, which I had a bunch of art in. But stay in chat. We're going to be in chat as this interview plays, which I recorded earlier because I have segments. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back after this.